I'm Katie Singer. I am very glad to be here. I am so glad that each of you is here. My talk is E-lephants on Our Hands, How Electronics Impact Climate Change. And would everyone kindly turn off their cell phones? This talk is dedicated to the memory of Doug Tompkins, founder of the North Face, creator of national parks throughout South America, and he never owned a cell phone. Every baby in the developed world is now born to an electronic ecosystem, a society that values technology more than nature. We humans quickly learn to expect electric lights, baby monitors, refrigerators, washing machines, air conditioners, TVs, mobile phones, iPads, iPods, wireless internet access, video games, online education, dental and medical care diagnosed and often delivered by electronic devices, computerized cars and global positioning systems, and electronic banking. Few of us know how to survive for more than a few days without electronic appliances or computers. From an early age, we give eye contact more to screens than to people, plants, or animals. We treasure our devices. We give our money to electronic manufacturers and to corporations that provide electric power, internet service, and movies. We expect electricity and electronics without consequences to our health or to wildlife or to Mother Earth. We see the natural ecosystem, electromagnetic energy, the seas, the sun, wind, topsoil, and raw materials beneath the Earth's surface as commodities that keep our electronic ecosystem going. We have no great mystery here. If we can pay for it, then we should get what we want. This is not a sustainable civilization. Human and wildlife health are increasingly challenged. Species are going extinct at an unprecedented rate. Sea levels and global temperatures are rising drastically. We each struggle to deal with our daily lives. We can hardly give attention to climate change. So I am quite humbled to report on how our electronic ecosystem contributes to climate change. For nearly 2 decades, I have known about the detrimental impacts of electronic technologies on human health and wildlife. Their impacts on climate change have remained even more invisible. Facing these issues is complicated by the fact that information communications technologies, that ecosystem, ICT, changes and grows faster than anyone can comprehend. For examples, hourly internet traffic now exceeds annual internet traffic from year 2000. From 2003 to 2013, our economy's transportation sector grew 15%. The information economy grew 45%. Manufacturers now produce, this is a quote from an industry report, far more transmitters than the world's farmers grow grains of wheat or rice. Here's the deal. Turning on a light requires electricity, power lines, wires within your home, and the light bulb. Turning on a light does not require dozens of lights to turn on elsewhere. But watching a video on an iPad requires powering up a vast network of computers and infrastructures all over the country, even all over the world. Watching a video starts with mining for lead, tin, coltan, and petroleum. It depends on factories that produce semiconductors, the building blocks of computers. It needs hundreds of chemical compounds per computer, factories that assemble and box each device, international shipping, electricity so you can charge your tablet, hundreds of thousands of base stations that form broadband networks, data centers that store the video, and air conditioning systems that cool the data centers. Every station in this sequence requires electricity. One click on Google uses about 11 watt-hours of energy, the same amount it takes to run a compact fluorescent light bulb for an hour. According to some estimates, each search emits just under 7 grams of CO2. Multiply that by the number of searches you do in one day, multiply that by 365 days, and then by 4 or 5 billion people with a computer in their hands, and we begin to see just how much electricity we're talking about. Burned coal generates carbon dioxide, which covers the earth, similar to the roof of a greenhouse. Heat gets trapped. It stays within our atmosphere, and so global temperatures rise. Arctic ice melts, and sea levels rise. In short, our revered electronics accelerate climate change. Alas, this is just one problem with our electronic ecosystem. To address any problem, we need a full picture. Today, I will name part of the herd of electronic elephants, I call them E-lephants, that we rarely notice when we text, email, Skype, monitor babies, watch videos, design new products, shop online, use global positioning systems, or search for an old friend on Facebook. I will also name some realistic solutions, E-lephants in their own right. I should say that I am not an electrical engineer. I aim to explain our electronic ecosystem at an introductory level. I have learned well that this stuff cannot be simplified without making gross errors. Please bear with me. Here are some of the E-lephants. Come on in. Over billions of years, living creatures have evolved in relation to the Earth's electromagnetic environment. As nature would have it, every cell in our bodies functions by electrochemical signals. To function, our bodies depend on electromagnetic cues from our natural environment. About 150 years ago, our species figured out how to generate, store, and transmit electrical energy. Since then, we have deployed a massive amount of electrical infrastructure and electronics that operate at frequencies and amplitudes that are not found in nature. Man-made electricity and electronics emit electromagnetic radiation, EMR. Our EMR emissions nearly saturate our environment. Man-made EMR harms human and wildlife health. Thousands of studies back this up. In fact, underwriters will not insure for health damages caused by wireless technologies. Manufacturing and powering electronics requires energy. Every electronic device requires semiconductors, transmitting and receiving antenna, factory assembly, shipping, broadband networks, and data storage. To satisfy our electronic desires, we ravage the earth for fossil fuels and rare minerals. Burning fossil fuels generates gases that trap heat within our atmosphere, thus raising our global temperature. To date, our aims to curtail global warming and increase our energy efficiency, such as solar power, hybrid cars, and the smart grid, mainly allow people with money to continue using electronics as much as we want. Like our laws, Many of our solutions serve corporations and electronic technologies. Our solutions do not protect our natural ecosystem or our health. They deny our dependence on the earth, our own hands, and each other. We are all addicted to electronics. Like any addict, we will take from our mother to feed our habit. In his book, Limits to Growth, climatologist Dennis Meadows warned that if we did not immediately and drastically curtail our use of natural resources, we could expect significant increases in drought, famine, floods, and war. That was 1971. Instead of heeding the warning, we grew our population with expectations of instant communication, rapid transit, and immediate gratification. We bought refrigerators, TVs, stereos, microwave ovens, and air conditioners. In the last 15 years, we bought cell phones and iPads and iPods and routers and made everything wireless. But the internet is not sustainable. Watching 1 hour of video per week wirelessly consumes annually more electricity than 2 new refrigerators use in 1 year. Our species still aims to have 1 refrigerator per household. But throughout the world, people now expect several mobile devices per person. And the average American watches 4 hours of on-screen entertainment per day. I am a concerned citizen with a deep love for all living creatures. Without man-made electricity and communications, I could not have traveled to this conference, nor had this talk recorded or broadcast. Like other privileged humans, I have enjoyed trucked-in food, electric lights, a telephone, a refrigerator, a car, and a word processor most of my life. I do not know how to live without any of these for more than a few days. I run 3 websites. I have no cell phone nor a computer, but I depend on people who have them. I need to live with less, and I don't know how. I am humbled daily by my own attempts to admit my contributions to this mess and to find realistic solutions that reduce my energy use. I live with deep respect for everyone who faces these issues. First, let me give an overview of electromagnetic energy. A few billion years ago, before humans created TVs or phones or the Federal Communications Commission, this planet was a mass of gases, water, dust, and rock. The sun heated the water, making clouds. Wind pushed clouds, generating static electricity. After a buildup of charge, lightning began to strike. A bombardment of lightning led to nucleic and amino acids, the building blocks of life. Early plants made oxygen and paved the way for animals. Within the Earth's electrochemical environment, plants and animals have evolved. Studies indicate that land and sea animals, as well as insects, have an electrical sense. For example, bees are positively charged and flowers are negatively charged. These charges help pollen stick to bees' hair while they visit a flower. Bees also use their electrical sense to determine whether or not a flower has recently been visited by another bee, and to decide whether the flower is worth visiting. To navigate, animals as diverse as migrating geese, sea turtles, and wolves use the Earth's magnetic field. Worms' brains include a sensor, C. elegans, a microscopic structure at the end of a neuron. It looks like a nanoscale TV antenna, and it helps worms navigate underground. Other animals probably have similar sensors. Scientists are still learning how they work. All human organs, including our brains and hearts, function by electrochemical signals. Even at rest, all of our cells have measurable voltage. In other words, without electromagnetic energy, none of us would be here. The ancient Greeks figured out how to generate electricity, but not how to store or transmit it. Around 1800, the observation that frogs' legs twitch in response to an electrical impulse led to the creation of electrochemical battery storage. By 1840, we could transmit electrical signals over telegraph wire. The electromagnet's invention in 1844 charged up the Industrial Revolution. By 1880, we could transmit electric power over long distances with alternating current electricity. We transitioned from visible mechanical technologies powered by horse and mule and human muscle, then steam and hydropower, to electromagnetic technologies whose power is mostly invisible. We built power plants, power lines, transformers, and motors. We electrified lights. We electrified tools for cooking, washing clothes, diagnosing and treating illnesses, for transporting goods, for constructing roads and buildings, for communicating, entertaining, and educating. We transmitted talk, music, and sitcoms over radio waves. We electrified everything. And then we went wireless. We created mobile devices, Wi-Fi, baby monitors, and smart utility meters. To support our 350 million mobile phones in the United States, we installed about 300,000 cell towers. We began to believe that we had control of nature. We congratulated ourselves for making our lives easier. In 2016, about 135 years after we began laying out this electric power grid, we have nearly saturated our environment with electromagnetic fields at frequencies and amplitudes that do not exist in nature. We have changed the Earth's electromagnetic environment significantly. Most of this change comes from our power grid, from radio and TV broadcasting antennas, and more recently, from cellular antennas, mobile devices, and Wi-Fi networks. To operate, each of these devices emits electromagnetic radiation, EMR, and each of them requires electricity. In 2010, I'm going to talk now briefly about how exposure harms wildlife. I'm calling this E-lephant number 2. In 2010, Spanish biologist Alfonso Balmori studied a common frog habitat about 450 feet from a cell tower. He placed metal screens, shields, around some frogs. 2 months later, frogs require 2 months to develop from the egg phase to the advanced stage of tadpole. The shielded frogs had a mortality of 4.2%. The unshielded frogs had a mortality of 90%. German scientist Ulrich Warnke reports that after cellular antennas were erected near beehives, longtime beekeepers observed pronounced restlessness and a greatly increased urge to swarm in their bee colonies. After nearby antennas went live, 65% of bee colonies abandoned their hives. GMOs, pesticides, and monocultures likely also play roles in colony collapse, but ill bees typically die in or near their hives. In most cases of colony collapse, no ill or dead bees are found. To help them navigate, bees and other creatures use cryptochromes, magnetically sensitive proteins in their eyes. Cryptochromes can sense the Earth's magnetic fields. Exposure to EMR emitted by cell towers disrupts cryptochrome-based navigation. E-lephant number 3, EMR exposure harms human health. To consider how human health is affected by EMR, let's first look at how the FCC determined that mobile devices are safe. In the mid-90s, engineers filled the head of a 200-pound mannequin with salty fluid. Then they took his temperature. This mannequin is called SAM, for Standard Anthropomorphic Man. Engineers gave Sam a cell phone for 6 minutes. Then they took his temperature again. Because Sam's temperature did not change by more than 2 degrees Celsius in those 6 minutes, the FCC still considers mobile devices safe. Note, this cell phone's effects were tested alone. Most of us are exposed to multiple devices at a time. Most of us are exposed to devices and services 24/7. But engineers at the FCC only recognize immediate thermal effects. They do not recognize non-thermal, long-term, cumulative, or combined effects of EMR exposure. The FCC does not consider that pregnant women, children, or people with medical implants might be affected by EMR exposure differently than 200-pound mannequins. And of course, most diseases take more than 6 minutes to develop. If you are curious, there are thousands of studies about non-thermal effects of EMR exposure. You can find them at bioinitiative.org or saferemr.com. DNA is affected. The blood-brain barrier is weakened. Voltage-gated calcium channels are weakened. Studies show that using cell phones and living or working near cell towers have increased risk of behavioral problems, rashes, brain cancer, memory issues, neurological disorders, reproductive health damage, and male infertility, insomnia, blurred vision, and on and on. Swedish studies have found that for every 100 hours of cell phone use, the risk of brain cancer increases by 5%. Using a digital cell phone as a teenager or younger increases risk of brain cancer by 420%. Meanwhile, no U.S. telecom corporation will give its subscribers' usage data to epidemiologists. That's why most studies about EMR exposure come from Europe, the Middle East, and China. Underwriters consider health damages caused by wireless technologies the leading risk to human health, greater than risk caused by GMOs, pesticides, asbestos, fracking, or nanotechnology. We should also consider the health of workers in the semiconductor industry. Semiconductors are the building blocks of computers. In the quote-unquote clean rooms, where semiconductors are made, workers wear special garb that covers them from head to toe. These suits do not protect human workers. They keep impurities from contaminating the semiconductors. The filters that workers wear trap dust, not chemical fumes. Workers routinely breathe or contact known or suspected carcinogens, including toluene, cadmium, arsenic, benzene, and trichloroethylene. As one worker diagnosed with breast cancer noted, clean has nothing to do with safe. E-lephant number 4, children absorb more radiation than adults. For our offspring, EMR now begins in utero, from cell phones, tablets, cell towers, Wi-Fi, and smart meters. On arrival, our children grow in close proximity to baby monitors, and cordless phones. In kindergarten, school districts around the country pass out tablets. Children's skulls are thinner than adult skulls. Their bodies are smaller with smaller surface areas, and so they absorb more radiation than adults. The FCC does not have different standards for children. In July 2015, electrical engineer Dr. Om Gandhi published a paper about this in the IEEE's journal, Spectrum. His article is called Yes, the Children are more exposed to radio frequency energy from mobile telephones than adults. And Dr. Hugh Taylor, the head of obstetrics at Yale Medical School, warns pregnant women and children to keep away from cell phones and Wi-Fi. Let me interrupt these sobering reports with stories of families who reduce their EMR exposure. The first story starts with a 10-year-old boy who lives with his family on a military base. He had no speech. He screamed every night from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. His parents took him to a pediatrician with a protocol that reduces EMR exposure. This physician didn't think the protocol would do any good, since the military base's background radiation levels would be so high. But the family was desperate. The doctor advised turning Wi-Fi off for at least 12 hours at night, not letting the child within 8 feet of a cordless phone or mobile device, and then turning electricity off to the child's bedroom at the breaker box. The boy's parents followed only one direction. They turned their Wi-Fi off at night. 3 days later, this child spoke a complete sentence. Motivated, the parents reduced as much of their EMR exposure as they could. The pediatrician put the boy on a therapeutic-grade fish oil. Within 3 weeks, he slept through the night. No more screaming. We do not say that reduced EMR exposure calmed this boy and improved his sleep. We say that the protocol is free and anyone can try it. E-lephant number 5, electronics need electricity. Our electronic ecosystem includes personally owned devices like mobile phones and PCs, business-owned computers and handheld devices, broadband wired communication networks, broadband wireless networks, factories that produce semiconductors, factories that assemble computers, data centers, which have become warehouse-scale supercomputers that store data, and distribution warehouses like Amazon. Each part of this ecosystem requires electricity. In 1999 and 2013, the National Mining Association and the American Coalition for Clean Coal Energy sponsored reports written by Mark Mills. Much of the information I share today about how electronics impact climate change comes from this report, which is called "The Cloud Begins with Coal." The industry sponsored this paper to prepare for increasing electricity demands. Much of our demand for electronics, electronic infrastructure, and electricity itself started in the 1990s with the rise of the internet and mobile services. We now expect internet access and cellular communications everywhere. Between 2010 and 2013, US mobile traffic rose 400%. It continues to rise. Between 2007 and 2013, China Mobile claimed a 50% improvement in their energy efficiency. But because of its increase in subscribers and base stations, China Mobile's overall electricity use increased. 4G networks consume 60 times more energy than 2G networks. At the University of Melbourne, they have a Center for Energy Efficient Telecommunications, CET. CET reports that as of 2014, communications infrastructure was expanding at over 20% annually. CET calculated that in 2012, worldwide energy consumption by the wireless cloud was 9.2, in 2012, worldwide energy consumption by the wireless cloud was 9.2 terawatt hours. By 2015, 3 years later, CET's estimates show the wireless cloud consuming up to 43 terawatt hours. That's a 460% increase in 3 years. According to CET, most of this consumption comes from wireless access networks like Wi-Fi and 4G. In other words, most of the cloud's energy, according to CET, goes to the infrastructure between your device and data centers. As for data centers are where we store videos and email and everything else. They require cooling systems. The average square foot of a data center uses 100 to 200 times more electricity than the average square foot of a modern office building. A tiny data room of a few thousand square feet uses more electricity than it takes to light a 100,000 square foot shopping mall. In April 2012, Greenpeace reported that if data centers were a country, they would rank 5th in use of energy. Also in 2012, the New York Times reported that data centers required the equivalent of 30 nuclear power plants. These figures are 4 years old. You can do the math and figure these figures have increased. The problem here is that for the average device user, electricity is cheap. The real cost of coal, the real cost of the cloud, keeps as invisible to us as electromagnetic radiation. In 2008, the anthropologist and community rights leader Jane Ann Morris calculated that if 8 billion people each pedaled 6 hours each day, we could keep the cloud going by bike-pedaled generators. That estimate is way out of date, of course, but perhaps if we each pedaled 6 hours a day for it, we'd decrease our use of wireless tech. E-lephant number 6, electronics are toxic. In 1997, the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition reported that the production of an 8-inch wafer, that's a semiconductor, uses the following resources: 4,200 cubic feet of bulk gases, 3,800 gallons of wastewater, 27 pounds of chemicals, 29 cubic feet of hazardous gases, 9 pounds of hazardous waste, 3,000 gallons of deionized water. In 1997, Intel estimated that each of its new plants produced 5,000 wafers per week. These figures are 2 decades old. Also in 1997, the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition reported that one computer workstation required 700 chemical compounds. Of course, most electricity comes from coal. Besides coal's emissions trapping heat within the Earth's atmosphere, coal-fired power plants generate mercury, also known as acid rain. It goes into the air, settles in seas and rivers, and gets consumed by fish, wreaking havoc on our food chain. Here's another encouraging story. A couple in Silicon Valley had 2 boys, both diagnosed with autism in toddlerhood. The oldest one was kicked out of preschool. The parents tried special diets and mercury chelation with minimal results. One day, the father unplugged a few wires under his desk and felt something ease up in himself. This dude was very attached to his electronics, but he and his wife cared more about their health. They eliminated all of their wireless tech. Their boys are now teenagers, and neither has autism. E-lephant number 7, coltan. Most electronics contain coltan. Short for columbite tantalite, coltan is a black tar-like mineral. Refining makes it a heat-resistant powder that can hold a high electric charge. Refined coltan is crucial to devices that store energy, including mobile phones, laptops, tablets, digital still cameras, video cameras, inkjet printers, hearing aids, pacemakers, jet engines, X-ray film, and pagers. The Congo holds 64% of the world's coltan. Mining for coltan has contributed to mass rapes and more loss of life than any other single situation since World War II. We're talking millions of people. To get coltan and satisfy our hunger for wireless devices, corporations have nearly destroyed Congo. Every new device requires coltan. You can learn more about coltan from Peter Eichstack's book, Consuming the Congo, War and Conflict Minerals in the World's Deadliest Place. E-lephant number 8, electronic waste. One computer can contain hundreds of toxic elements and chemicals, including lead, mercury, cadmium, bromated flame retardants, and polyvinyl chloride. Many of these chemicals are known to cause cancer, respiratory illnesses, and reproductive problems. When you dispose of an electronic device, its chemicals can migrate into soil, water, and air. The chemicals can accumulate in our bodies and our environment. Meanwhile, the lifespan of each mobile device, computer, and cell tower grows shorter, generating more and more e-waste. In 2003, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality found that in the course of 2 years, 350 million computers are disposed of in landfills containing 4 billion pounds of lead, 2 million pounds of cadmium, and 400,000 pounds of mercury. It's a 13-year-old figure. But data centers require constant upgrading of equipment, and they constantly produce massive electronic waste. On average, every Westerner now discards 66 pounds of electronic waste per year. We export most of this waste to India, China, and Nigeria. Children routinely comb these dumps for useful bits they can sell, exposing themselves to hazards with no protection whatsoever. Some of our e-waste is sent to U.S. prisons, where inmates recycle it, again without protection. E-lephant number 9. Our solutions mainly give us the idea that we can keep using electronics. Let's start with compact fluorescent light bulbs, which use less energy than incandescent bulbs. Most CFLs contain mercury. Eventually, these bulbs and their mercury end up in landfills and migrate to waterways. If a CFL breaks on your floor, you've got a mercury hazard to clean up. Fluorescent lights also create harmonics, also known as dirty power, on 60 hertz wires. They chop the current, creating electromagnetic radiation on your wires. Generally, incandescents, which have been banned in some cases, are still the safest alternative. Making them with linear power supplies would make them energy efficient and keep them safe. Let's look at solar power. It aims to decrease use of fossil fuels. Photovoltaic solar panels collect sunlight and convert it to direct current electricity, DC. To provide alternating current electricity, AC, which is available at outlets, since most electronic devices and appliances ultimately require AC, the collected DC goes through an inverter. Most inverters generate magnetic fields, also known as extremely low frequency electromagnetic radiation. An inverter's EMR emissions can exceed safety standards for workers set by OSHA, can exceed safety standards set for people with medical implants set by the FDA and implant manufacturers, and they can exceed safety standards for the public health set by European countries and the World Health Organization. And also, the dirty power generated by inverters, called dirty electricity, Prevention Magazine has reported that dirty power can be carcinogenic. Then there's a net meter with a solar power system. It connects the solar power system to the grid. It tracks surplus electricity sent to the utility and what you draw when you have none stored. Like a smart meter, the net meter emits pulsed radio frequency radiation. You do not want a meter like this on the other side of a bedroom wall. You don't want a neighbor with a pulsing meter pointing toward your bedroom. Significantly, most solar systems are now installed without a battery, without a place to store extra electricity, leaving users dependent on corporate electricity at night and on cloudy days. To create safer solar power, you can keep the system DC using 12-volt batteries to charge your appliances, which will also need to be DC. You can create a safer AC system by filtering the panels and the inverter and keeping the inverter and the net meter far from frequented areas, especially bedrooms. FYI, filtering requires power and reduces energy efficiency. You also need an electromechanical meter to track electricity sent to your utility company. And FYI, I do not know of a safe way to generate electricity from wind turbines. For people who do not go off-grid, utility corporations have developed a smart grid in order to increase energy efficiency. Every household gets a smart meter that transmits data about your gas, water, and electric usage to your utility. Some meters transmit thousands of times per day. Typically, they work like a cell phone transmitting data by a text message. They can transmit for a half mile or more. Most transmissions last a fraction of a second, which sounds innocuous, but these spikes operate at amplitudes and frequencies that are not found in nature. 1 meter can transmit 10,000 times per day. PG&E, our country's largest utility, has received more than 10,000 health complaints since they installed smart meters. If you live in a state where you can opt out and perhaps pay to keep and self-read an analog meter, you'd still be subject to transmissions from neighbors' meters. The smart grid operates with the idea that delivering electricity smoothly is most efficient. So if we all do laundry and watch movies and use electronic medical equipment in the evenings and on weekends, That would smooth the delivery of electricity, which businesses demand primarily on weekdays. With smart meters, a utility can identify exactly when you use electricity. Eventually, they will charge more for weekday use in order to motivate people to prefer evening and weekend use. Besides disturbing many people's health, many smart meters have caught fire when they're installed. If you have homeowners or renters insurance, check your policy to see if it covers fire damage caused by a smart meter installation. Hybrid and electric car manufacturers offer another solution to consumers who want to do the right thing. Alas, these cars each have about 8 magnetic field emitting computers. In a Prius, for example, at every stop, computers signal the battery to recharge. The magnetic fields at each stop can shut off a deep brain stimulator, a medical implant commonly given to people with Parkinson's and other nervous system disorders at every stoplight. How are pregnant women and children affected by riding in a Prius? These are good questions. I know of no federal agency or car manufacturer who has considered those questions. The bottom line here is that we can't just ask about energy efficiency and curtailing fossil fuel use. With every electronic device, we also need to ask about its EMR emissions and its biological effects. E-lephant number 10, our legal frame. When I was a child, a rabbi told me, if you honor the Sabbath, the rest of the commandments will take care of themselves. Shabbat, the Hebrew word for Sabbath, means not to strike. Jewish law dictates to leave nature as it is on the Sabbath. You can't light a fire, touch money, or carry anything outside of your house. You've got to rest. In modern times, you can't turn on an electric switch, ride in a car, or use the internet. Likewise, every 7th year, the Bible encourages farmers to rest their land in order to replenish the soil's nutrients. Now, we have no rest. The internet stays lit 24/7, and we mine until there's no mining left to be had. Let me name a few of the laws and regulations that frame our modern lives. In 1934, Congress established the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC laid out a definition of harmful interference. That's anything that interferes with existing radio or TV broadcasts and now cellular or internet services. According to the FCC, harmful interference has never included harm to human health or the environment. In 1996, Congress passed the Telecommunications Act. Its Section 704 states that no health or environmental concern may interfere with the placement of a cell tower. There's that 6-minute test of SAM to prove cell phone safety. And then we get to specific absorption rates, Sars. These were also established in 1996. They allow the head and the trunk to absorb 1.6 watts per kilogram of radiation over 1 gram of tissue. Extremities, such as the hands and feet, can absorb 4 watts per kilogram of radiation over 10 grams of tissue. In September 2013, the FCC decided to revise these they maintain these standards. They also reclassified the outer parts of our ears as extremities. You get that? Effectively, the FCC now allows the head to absorb 3 times, or the outer ears, to absorb 3 times as much radiation as it could when the outer ears were not classified as extremities. FYI, children, pregnant women, people with medical implants, and healthy 200-pound mannequins all have the same specific absorption rate. For a more comprehensive description of rules and regulations around electricity and telecommunications, please visit emrpi.org. That's for Electromagnetic Radiation Policy Institute. And please read the legal chapter in my book, An Electronic Silent Spring. Number 11, we deploy new technologies all the time. Li-Fi, driverless cars, wireless chargers. Driverless cars could be on the road by 2019. These cars require 8 or more computers to function. Each computer emits electric and magnetic fields. Will any manufacturer or government agency test the effects of exposure to these fields on passengers before they market the car? Will they study how children, pregnant women, and people with medical implants are affected by exposure to EMR from driverless cars? Probably not. Li-Fi is a light-based wireless internet transmitter. It's fiber optics without the cables. Google and Facebook and a half dozen other corporations also plan to blanket the Earth in Wi-Fi with thousands of satellites and balloons. Launching these will require fuel, which of course will generate CO2. None of these technologies has been proven harmless, and no agency regulates the energy use of new deployments. Number 12. Most of us, including children, are addicted to electronics. I have another story here, actually, a study. In the 1970s, at Stanford University's preschool, researchers offered 52 4-year-olds a marshmallow in a private room. Then the researcher told the child that he or she had to go somewhere for 15 minutes. If the marshmallow was uneaten when they returned, the child would get another marshmallow. 10 years later, the children who'd had the self-control to wait 15 minutes to eat that first marshmallow were more able to cope with frustration and resist temptation as teenagers. These kids had sung songs, napped, or thought of other things while they waited. As teenagers, the researchers found that they could concentrate and think ahead. They were competent and skillful and more self-assured than the teens who in preschool could not delay gratification for 15 minutes. This study tells me that whenever anyone has an electronic device, they need skills in self-regulation as well. So we need to strengthen our abilities to sing songs, nap, and use our imagination. Number 13, real solutions will require every person changing their expectations and habits. Everyone participates in this mess. No one gets off the hook. We need to declare ourselves students of energy efficiency and safety and commit to getting informed. Then we get our questions rolling. Before we power up an electronic device, we need to ask, how did the FCC determine that this is safe? How did the FCC determine that the infrastructure this device requires is safe? How are pregnant women, children, people with implants, non-users, and wildlife affected by electromagnetic signals emitted by this device, including from secondhand exposure? In the event of harm caused by this device and/or infrastructure, who would be liable? How much energy went into manufacturing this device? How much energy is used to operate the infrastructure it requires? And then we need to get personal. Could EMR exposure be a factor in my insomnia or memory issues? Could EMR exposure be a factor in my child's autism or ADHD, my friends' and neighbors' brain tumors? Could my electronics contribute to our ecosystem's loss of biodiversity? How do we educate children for power outages, for decreased use of technology and electricity? Blaming corporations and government agencies has so far failed to create the awareness or change that we need. This is the biggest elephant in the room. Real solutions means reducing our use of electronics, which will reduce our EMR emissions, EMR exposure, and our energy use. So here are some ideas. Start with your bedroom. Turn Wi-Fi off for at least 12 hours every night while you sleep until you get wired internet access. Unplug everything you can in your bedroom while you sleep. Don't just turn it off, unplug it. If you sleep with your head on the other side of a wall from your refrigerator or breaker box, move your bed. Next, you've got to rethink your mobile devices. When a mobile device is on, depending on how it's programmed, it'll check every 5 minutes or every minute or constantly to see if you've got a message. Each time your device asks the nearest cell tower this question, it zaps you. If you're thinking of shielding your phone with a protective case, beware. The Environmental Working Group studied protective cases and found that they can actually increase the user's EMR exposure by 70%. Instead, think of your phone as a message taker. Turn it off. Set its alarm to let you know, say, every 2 hours that you've got a message. Limit yourself to, say, no more than 10 minutes a day on the phone. Never hold it to your head. Use the speakerphone. Don't use mobiles in moving vehicles. At every mile, when your device connects to a new cell tower, it goes to maximum power. Much of this radiation gets trapped in the car or the bus or train and bounces around, since vehicles are metal boxes. Protect children. And now let me speak a little about screen time exposure, which is different from EMR exposure. Interactive screen time, that's using a keyboard or a mouse to interact with a screen, is much more hazardous to children's brain development than looking passively at a TV. So video games are much more detrimental to brain development than passive TV. Child psychiatrist Dr. Victoria Dunkley has created an excellent program that has helped hundreds of children to end meltdowns, raise grades, and boost social skills. Here's how it works. Give your child a 3-week electronic fast. If you are intimidated by that prospect, Dr. Dunkley suggests you compare it to another meltdown. After the fast, you reintroduce electronics, starting, say, with a half hour of use per day. If the child starts demonstrating erratic behavior after 45 minutes of screen time, then you go back to a half-hour limit per day. I should clarify here that you do not need to be a child to try an electronic fast or to reduce your EMR exposure. And it helps, definitely, it helps children when their parents and teachers limit their use. As for saving energy, transmitting a movie takes more energy than transmitting a photograph. Transmitting a picture takes more than a voice message, which takes more than a text. To conserve energy, watch videos selectively. Do not download videos or pictures on mobile devices. Limit your downloads to wired devices. Schools, churches, and businesses also need to give attention to these issues. Here's another family in an affluent urban area. In school, in first grade, the younger boy had intense headaches and pulled out his hair. He was so restless that he couldn't sit in a chair. He had to have a bouncy ball. At home, he had none of these problems. Then, at a basketball game in second grade, he told his mom, My heart's beeping really fast and it won't stop. A children's heart specialist found no problems with his heart. An environmental toxicologist suggested that attending school with routers in every classroom, wireless microphones on every teacher, smartboards and iPads could disturb this child's heart. This was a preschool to 8th grade school, and in fact, it was stocked with multiple defibrillators. Using Austrian medical guidelines, a doctor found that this boy's problems came from exposure to radiofrequency radiation. The parents transferred their boy to a school with the least amount of technology in town. He is now a healthy 7th grader. He's one of 2 in his class without a mobile device. He considers himself lucky not to have to deal with one. I would love to know the difference in students' and teachers' health and students' test scores in schools that are wired and schools that are wireless. I would love to know the difference in electric bills. We need to start tracking this. We need plenty. We need people who can admit that we are powerless over technology and that our lives have become unmanageable. And in case you didn't know, that's step 1 from Alcoholics Anonymous. I've just substituted the word technology for alcohol. We need people who can get sober. Health and sustainability still require respecting nature's messages and honoring our limitations. The idea that we can do anything we want because we have the money and the technology is not sustainable. We need contests between neighbors, schools, and businesses to reduce EMR emissions and energy use. We need parents and teachers who care about their children enough to reduce their own electronic habits. We need investors who will manufacture safer electronics, electricians who can replace wireless access with wired access, accountants who can show us the true cost of wireless technologies. We need lawyers who will work for public health and the environment, including around telecommunications. We need legislation that requires manufacturers to label cell phones so that users are alert about keeping distance between the phone and their bodies, as Berkeley, California has done. We need telecom corporations to maintain landline infrastructure. We need safe and energy-efficient power systems on and off grid. We need citizens who can get Congress to fund the EPA and the FDA to bring regulations up to date with the pace of invention. We need libraries to buy meters that measure magnetic and radio frequency fields and to offer workshops about using them. A wiring error can expose a park or a backyard to AC magnetic fields. The first step in canceling such electromagnetic radiation is detecting it. Every person has something to contribute. We need forums. Cultural change takes place in groups of 7. We need neighbors, parents, and colleagues to get together as we learn to reduce our EMR exposure and our energy use. Is anyone here open to forming an alliance with 6 others who aim to reduce their EMR exposure, their screen time, and their energy use? Would you stand up? Thank you very much.